future of healthcare has arrived. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are transforming the practice of medicine and improving patient outcomes. This is Smarter Healthcare with AI. Conversations with Dr. Hassan Tetteh as he shares insights into the healthcare of tomorrow and how we can help create it today.
My guest this week is Dr. Amol Joshi, the Byrne Betty Fellow and Associate Professor of Strategic Management and Innovation and Commercialization at Wake Forest University, where he serves as an affiliate faculty advisor on healthcare innovation, artificial intelligence, biomedical informatics, and precision medicine. An experienced entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, Dr. Joshi researches how inventors create and commercialize new technologies across borders. Amol, welcome to the podcast.
Dr. Tetteh, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be a part of this podcast.
So you and I met, of course, at the esteemed Wake Forest University, which has become near and dear to my heart because my son is a freshman there. And yes, I've been using every excuse I can to find excuses to come visit him. And you and I met during a course that you were teaching. Why don't you tell the audience about that course? Because I think it's important and it'll inform our discussion because you are truly an expert in this field of artificial intelligence, particularly when it comes to healthcare. So I'll let you describe what it was that you taught and that I benefited from.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Tetteh. And we need to find more ways to have you come to Wake Forest and Winston-Salem more frequently. But it was a pleasure meeting you. I will say you were one of the most active participants in the session that we had. We had an all-day program through the Wake Forest University School of Professional Studies, and it was on AI and its emerging impact in healthcare innovation. And we had a number of healthcare professionals, and I would say from a broad spectrum of viewpoints. We had medical professionals like Dr. Tetteh. We had hospital systems leaders and administrators. We had frontline care providers. We also had folks involved in medical school education and even a few folks who were involved in the regulatory and government affairs aspects of it. So we had a broad range of participants, but the idea was to understand what is going on with AI. And as a business or technical leader in my respective organization, what do I need to know about AI so I can make thoughtful decisions about the use of AI to improve patient outcomes first and foremost, but also improve the performance of the organizations that I was working in. So that was the spirit of the session. And we used a couple of things. We used a research-driven approach with some latest insights from published studies. I think Dr. Tetteh and I share an appreciation for evidence-based medicine and evidence-based management. And then we also relied heavily on case studies of successes and failures. And I think that helped have a very lively and thought-provoking discussion. I'd say, Dr. Tetteh, with your vast experience, particularly in helping the government and others think about AI strategically, you certainly added a lot and helped co-create a very productive discussion that we had in the fall.
Well, you're very kind to say that. Thank you so much. I full disclosure, I mentioned this to our fellow participants in the course and to you as well, that I was sort of acting as a bit of a secret shopper, a little bit of an auditor, and also just doing some good research because I've written a few books and I know that good writers are good readers and they also learn about what's going on the subject matter that they're writing about. So I disclosed to you and the colleagues there that I'm in the middle of writing my book, Smarter Healthcare with AI, the name of the same namesake of this podcast. And of course, what was really interesting was to hear the different perspectives because as you mentioned, we had folks from all different sort of sectors in healthcare, the leadership, the participants, patients, and also providers. So you gave us quite a bit of insight and you gave us, as you mentioned, a sort of broad, holistic 50,000-foot view of what's going on with AI in healthcare, but you also drilled down by giving us a bit more of a granular perspective on the actual case studies where AI was being applied both successfully and unsuccessfully. What got you interested in this topic? Because clearly you have done many things in business. You are currently at the faculty at Wake Forest. There's a plethora of different kinds of subjects that one could be teaching and researching, but yet you've chosen to sort of bring not only the combined perspective of all your experience, but also, what's happening right now to talk about this particular subject, AI and AI in healthcare in particular. How did that happen?
Well, thanks for the opportunity to talk a little bit about that. In a sense, the answer to your question is I've come full circle in my career. I started out, and at my heart, I will always be an engineer. I was trained as an engineer, electrical engineering, computer engineering, hardware and software. And I started my early part of my career designing audio products, electronics, telecommunications technology. From that, I had moved into starting a company. I founded a company called Be Vocal. We were an early pioneer in speech recognition technology. And I have to say, the technology we had, because of the computational power, was absolutely primitive compared to what we have today. There's no comparison in terms of the computational power and the capabilities. But we were, as I said, early pioneers developing the technology. And specifically what we worked on was speech recognition. So being able to understand human speech and translate that into text, convert that into text, and then make some intelligent business or individual decisions based on that. And when I look at where the technology is today, it is generations beyond what we even imagined. We didn't have smartphones. All our phones were dumb. We didn't have the computational capabilities. We used to have big servers installed in phone company networks to do the kind of processing you can do on your own phone right now. And so that improvement in computational power has made a lot of applications possible. And what fascinated me is in the early days of speech, it was all about reliability and getting the accuracy of recognizing the speech. We are so far beyond that today where we're finally close to the reliability where we can start credibly thinking about medical applications. And I think that's the light bulb that clicked for me, is that we went beyond interesting prototypes and applications to really being able to do something impactful in a meaningful way, because the reliability threshold, which from being a surgeon, has to be extremely high. And we never had that before. And I think just with the innovations in the last couple of years, we got to that point. And the other thing that dawned on me in working with a lot of medical professionals like yourself at our School of Medicine, the innovation is primarily software. There's hardware and there's equipment, but a lot of it's the algorithm and how does the algorithm interact with people? What is the user interface? So as I said, the long answer to your question is, I think I've come full circle. I started out in the very early days of this technology when what we were doing was very basic, to now so many advanced applications are available. And I thought it was time to go back and do some fundamental research to try to help people make better decisions on how to use the technology. So that's kind of how we started out and how we got to that point. But thank you for that opening question.
Yeah, you mentioned the primitive technology that you were working on. Now, obviously, you're giving yourself a far too little credit because as you all know, I think this is a very sophisticated audience, especially if they're thinking about AI. This was not something that just came out of the darkness, right? It was not something that came down with two tablets and someone said, here we go, we have AI. It has been built upon over, decades of work that early pioneers, really dedicated their lives and their efforts to producing, building upon things that came before. The old adage of, we are standing on the shoulders of giants. And of course, you would be one of those giants that we're standing upon. Because I remember when you told the class about what you did in the early days, as you say, this primitive technology, I immediately started thinking about dictation. As a surgeon, we have to dictate our cases. We just speak into this phone and magically at some point, it makes its way into the medical record typed up and nice and neat. Well, that takes a lot of effort and takes time. And, at one point there were people that were listening very attentively and then trying to type that in. Now that a lot of that is automated. And for the technology to be able to grasp these medical terminologies, these concepts, and then the different sort of tones, the different accents that different surgeons may have to, just naturally have, and yet still decipher that and then produce a very, very, very producible, reliable document is pretty fascinating. And we have to thank people like you that worked on that technology very early on.
Well, there was a lot of folks that worked on that technology, and I was just, part of that team with some of the early inventions. But we had to solve a lot of problems to get to the translation problem. So one of the things that my company had specialized in the early days was filtering out the background noise from the cell phone. Most people were calling from cell phones. Cell phones were just starting to take off and be widely penetrated in the market. So you had to solve that problem first, because if you think about it, even one person understanding another, you have to be able to listen through the noise that might be in the background. That's not easy for a person to do, but is there a way to automate that? So that was one thing. But there are some interesting trade-offs, and I think this is where folks like me who are on the technology development, invention, and benefit a lot from working with leaders like yourself who are in theater, who are there at the front lines, working with patients, working in the hospital systems, because there's some insights and some trade-offs that can be managed. So, for example, Dr. Tetteh, you and other physicians have a specialized vocabulary. You're trained to use very precise terminology. That actually benefits when you're doing translation and the speech recognition, because you don't have to search the universe of words. There's kind of a limited set of vocabulary that you're going to use so we can take advantage of that fact, because we can guess ahead of time the way you will describe conditions, and we can make a probabilistic, accurate prediction of what you might say next. And so the legal profession's the same way. My friends who are lawyers, they talk a certain way. That's something that you could do. Now, where it becomes more challenging is your patients could be from many different backgrounds, and they may describe things in plain English, which may actually be harder to decipher for the system. Using some specialized, unique words actually helps the system be accurate. So understanding the context in which the care is provided and how the patient will interact really helps with making those trade-offs to improve these systems. And these are the kind of tricks of the trade that we develop. And to your point, what's happened that's really remarkable is the cumulative knowledge that we've gathered over the last few decades is outstanding. I mean, it's just amazing. Think about the content that's available on the internet. If you want to train engines to be able to recognize things, you have a huge body of content. Now, whether folks are doing that legally or illegally is a different thing in terms of honoring copyright, but the cumulative knowledge is there and you can build on that. So all of those points you touched on are very, very important.
Absolutely. And we talked about many things in the class and in the course. And as I think about our application of AI in healthcare in this new era that we're entering upon, I think about, again, putting things in context. Certainly AI is not new. It's not brand new. It's been around for decades. We've described it, back in the 50s, very, very well established. However, I believe we are at a sort of a very interesting time in a different era now than we were decades ago. And I believe we have this convergence of some super forces. Some of them you mentioned and highlighted, right? And those super forces, in my opinion, and this is sort of taking the collective view of many people, but I think those 5 super forces, one is computer power. So yes, software is definitely important, but we definitely have a lot more computing power than we had before. I like to look at this phone here and think about my old days as a young teenager and adolescent, pounding away at my Commodore 64 for hours and hours just to be able to produce something after writing a whole bunch of code that will last for a couple of minutes. Nowadays, I'm probably carrying around, the equivalent of many, many, many Commodore 64s in this supercomputer. So we have this computing power. We have a lot of data. Like you mentioned, we have this plethora of data, the internet, it's all digitized, which is absolutely key for it to be able to be incorporated into these algorithms. And in the medical health space, we've been digitizing information for many years now. So we have a lot of information. So we have all this data. Then we have investments. We've been making tons and tons of investments. People are investing a lot more. The government, the private sector, they're investing lots of money in all these things. So you have those 3 super forces, right? We have the computing power, we have data, we have this amount of information and this investment. And then we have what I like to call this connectivity and the ability to be able to connect all of these devices and to be able to access information that may be, far away. And we have federated systems where we can get data lakes just to be incorporated and ingested into these algorithms that are being developed. And then I think finally, one of the other super forces that definitely encompass you and others, certainly those early pioneers and those that are at the forefront right now, are people. I think that's the big super force and probably the big differentiator, because people are doing incredible things now with this technology, and they're developing algorithms, so much so that we have algorithms that can write on their own and code that can write on its own. So when you think about all of those super forces converging, this era of generative AI, all of the things that we talked about in our class and our coursework, but more importantly, what you've seen over the span of your career, the research that you've been conducting, and the things that you have been seeing right now, where do you see the most promising new healthcare technologies coming on the horizon?
Wow, that's a very challenging question to ask, and it's the essential question. Let me step back a moment and answer it this way by saying, I think out of the 5 converging super forces that you mentioned, they're all very important, but I think the powerful insight that you shared is the people element of it. Because I think the people element is the enabler for all of the others in this sense. If our patients, if everyday people can get a sense of how AI can be used in other areas of their life, then they will immediately say, why not in healthcare? And where can this also help me? And I think that that is something that with previous technologies, we did not have this rapid adoption and use to everyday people in many other. So as a simple example, if I'm a frequent traveler and I use AI chatbot to talk to my airline or my travel agency, and I'm very comfortable with them handling those important details and helping me, then I get conditioned to think about, are there other interactions where I would also be comfortable? And maybe it's not the patient-physician interaction, but certainly scheduling my next appointment or going for a lab test or things like that that are in the back office. The point is, the people element, the ubiquity of the technology makes the barriers to adoption much less, because it gives many opportunities for folks to have a trustworthy experience with AI. And I think that is really the key. So in terms of healthcare applications, the ones that I am the most excited about are those that give us the chance to do early diagnosis and early detection and diagnosis of very serious conditions that impact the patient, their family, and society as a whole. So just to share one that I'm working with through Wake Forest, I think we talked about this briefly, through the Center for Healthcare Innovation, the team there has developed a way to analyze electronic health records and use that to generate a frailty score. So to look at someone's frailty. So in other words, how susceptible are they to other forms of risk? And an offshoot of that research in a new direction is looking at, based on the information in their healthcare records and wearable devices, are there early indicators of cognitive decline? And if you think about it, it actually, again, comes full circle in a way to voice technology. We know that if someone's had a micro stroke or earlier stroke, they can start to show signs of aphasia. Well, this delay in word finding can actually be detected and measured using the same technology we use to recognize speech. What about taking that along with someone's gait or walking pattern, other indicators that you get off of a wearable device, and trying to see if, in fact, that an individual has some signs that something may be going wrong? We all know that the earlier we can find that out, the better we can care for that person and have better outcomes. So I'm excited about those technologies because those are relatively within our reach. And we have a lot of building blocks in place, and solving them up front would save a lot of downstream pain and suffering and really improve the lives of people around the world. So I think that's just one area. I will give a shout out to my colleagues in radiology. I know they've been leading the way in terms of FDA approvals. Not surprisingly, they have 80 to 90% of the data in the healthcare system, so they have a good base to work with. But my hat's off to them for pioneering the way. That is certainly going to be an important immediate area. But I think this early detection and diagnosis of chronic conditions is going to be an important part of where we can really use AI. And I think, to borrow some of your ideas from your earlier writings, purpose, personalization, and partnership, that's where it comes in from your thinking how to bring those together in those technologies. But that's my initial answer to a very tough question you posed.
Early detection and diagnosis. And, you mentioned something that I want to build upon. So the observation that, you identified people as the greatest superforce of all of this, and the ubiquitousness of all these people working with this technology. But the key thing I want to hone in on it and maybe ask your opinion on what would be the impact is this idea of the adoption, right? Because again, AI technology has been around, but it's been largely obscure and sort of out of the public domain, unless you were a computer scientist or you just happen to be one of those people that happen to be a math whiz and you just really love this stuff and you just had nothing better to do but to just spend your time in algorithms and, Bayesian statistics and things like that. You may not necessarily been that interested in AI. And tangentially, you've been exposed to things like the Netflix offerings. And if you like this, you might like that. But we saw with the OpenAI offering of ChatGPT, 100 million users adopting this and becoming subscribers within a month. Like the most rapid adoption of a technology, by far. Any other social media platform, any other sort of subscription-based type of technology platform. What do you think is the impact of so many people at once sort of interacting with this technology? In this case, the large language models. But what is the impact, do you think, in terms of accelerating some of the innovation in healthcare? Because as you mentioned, the people are both the consumer, but also, as you know, the innovators. And as they become more comfortable, besides the applications that you mentioned in the diagnostic realm and certainly in the detection and early detection, what other sort of offshoots do you think will happen because of this rapid adoption of AI by so many in such a short period of time?
Yes, I think to unpack that question a little bit further, it gets to the heart of, if you have mass adoption on the scale that we have seen in such a rapid time frame, the nice thing is, from a business point of view, it creates market incentives for people to develop tools and to invest in standardization. And I think that's really the key. If you know immediately out of the gate, there's this kind of market out there and there's this kind of interest, you can take that step to invest in these toolkits and these standards. And we know, and I know you know from your frontline experience, electronic healthcare records, right? Getting to that part where you have the standard, and we're still working on that. We haven't quite solved that yet. But the proliferation of standards and making these tools available for free or at a very low cost enables a lot of experimentation. And I think that's the essence of this. We actually don't know which one is going to be the killer app, quote unquote, or the killer apps. But if we have low cost or accessible tools based on a standardized framework, we can encourage 1,000 flowers to bloom. We can allow lots of experimentation to take place, and we can figure out what works. The thing that I like about that is, before making a huge investment, we can try things on a small scale and pilot these ideas. Because the other thing that happens here is sometimes we have unanticipated consequences, or the use case is not exactly what we thought. And before putting billions into it, maybe we could put millions, maybe before millions, we could put tens of thousands of dollars and do small scale experiments. And I think that's the real power. And I think that's where both of us, having experience working in academic learning health systems, perhaps have a unique advantage, because we can have one side on the pure research realm, but another in the clinical practice and the commercialization realm. And we have a little bit that freedom to experiment, because I think there are other practical areas that are potentially very impactful for AI, but they're not going to get the headline. So you asked me to get to your question, where else? There's the whole back office realm. There's revenue cycle management. And I shared with you, when I asked physicians why people aren't talking about that, it's because no researcher is going to win a Nobel Prize on using AI in that area. If they can do it for the next big biopharma drug discovery, they will. But there's a host of things that are largely unregulated, or shall we say lightly regulated, that are efficiency or process improvements, if done ethically and fairly with representative data, could improve the patient experience and improve the performance of the entire care pathway. So I'll give you a simple example. We talked about using translation or the speech recognition and then translating what a doctor says into medical coding, for example. You want to know, is there an issue perhaps with how medical conditions are being coded? Are they being miscoded or undercoded or overcoded? And it could be not intentional. It could be because of the way that people are trained and their exposure to the conditions and their understanding. But making sure that is correct is the key part of the whole care process. So that's something where AI technology can be used in the back office in a way that could also very much improve the experience for everyone on the caregiver side, especially on the patient side, and also on the payer side. And they're all part of the equation here. Everybody has to benefit for this to be deployed, as you know.
Yes. So revenue cycle management, the back office, diagnostics, early detection. So obviously there are many opportunities, as you have just espoused, to apply AI to make things better for the patient from the experiential standpoint, hopefully the outcome standpoint, and just the experience overall. All right, Amol, let's pause for now. But in our next episode of Smarter Healthcare with AI, Professor Amol Joshi from the Wake Forest University School of Business, who will share insights on the role academia plays in driving innovation in artificial intelligence.
We operate a school of medicine, a large academic learning health system. We should be at the forefront, and we aim to be at the forefront of testing some of these ideas. We're not just going to develop it, we'll test it at a small scale, and if it's worthwhile, we'll share it.
This has been Smarter Healthcare with AI. If you'd like to find out how to bridge the gap between medical experts and tech innovators and discover how AI can make us healthier and more human, go to Tetteh.com. Smarter Healthcare with AI with Dr. Hassan Tetteh is a production of Forbes Books.